What is up, folks? Episode number 9, MMASucka Live. Joined by Suraj Sukumar, man.
How's it going?
This guy used to be a part of the MMASucka squad way back in the day. Coming aboard here to join me today because he helps out with the Prospect Watch, and we got a doozy of a Prospect Watch for April, so I figured I'd bring him on. We'll shoot the shit. We'll talk about a few of the prospects, the top 10 list, and then we'll go over a few of the fight cards. Battery on my computer is running low. I know that sounds ghetto and amateur, but it's all good. Suraj, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm pretty pumped to just get these cards kind of flowing. If you think about it, even though we didn't have the UFC, for a weekend, it seems like we're watching so many different fights all over the world, some great fighters we've come to love, and then we're going to cap it off with another UFC card as usual,
100%, man. And Bellator on Friday. We had one championship yesterday. We had a great week of fights this week upon us. Sort of dive into something that's a little hilarious. I was listening to Call Her Daddy. I don't know if you've heard of it. Ever listened to it? But on my drive home, I had the podcast going in my car, and it was Holly Madison on the show. And she's, if you don't know who she is, she's a former Playmate. She lived at Hugh Hefner's house, and some of the stories this girl told, man, holy, he was given them medication that he would call leg spreaders and stuff. Some interesting stuff. It's an episode that I suggest everyone check out because I know your dad always told you he loved to read the articles, not look at the pictures, right? Well, with that, we'll get into our top 10 list. Suraj helped me out. He did a wicked video that accompanies the top 10 prospect list, and we'll go over our top 10 prospects right here. This is the list we've got going. We'll run through 10 to 1. Pretty killer list we got going, and from there we'll rock and roll to tell you guys what exactly is the case. At number 10, we've got Zhu Rong, and Suraj, I want you to just go over this guy because he's a bit of a beast. He's coming in at 10, but I don't want to take anything away from the guy because he's got a hell of a record.
Yeah, so the little things that I did find about him, he's definitely young. He's the true gauge of a prospect, very international. I was talking about a video, we'll just touch on it quickly, how, he did climb the ranks in China pretty well. He ended up becoming their lightweight champion over there. And so I think, he's starting to sell out cards pretty regularly, and UFC's taken notice and brought him over. The age factor is what I really like about him. He's powerful, but he doesn't, the finishing stuff like that isn't what really caught my eye. I think that he's just action-packed. I talk a little bit how not a lot of lateral movement, technical striking wise, not a wonder boy or anything like that. But he likes to push forward. He likes to throw kicks to the legs, and he's coming in with big, heavy hands. And so, he's exciting.
One thing we spoke about, not in the Prospect Watch, but was level of his experience. He hasn't fought the levels of the guys that some of the UFC fighters have, but he's got a 17-3 record. He comes from the regional scene. It'll be interesting to see how he does inside the octagon. We ranked him at 10. He's got a lot of fights under his belt, but again, these guys that come from Asia can get fights every single week if they want multiple fights. So how do you see this fight playing out?
Well, the big thing with him is it just coming down to how good's the grappling, how good's the what we're going to see from him on the ground. Because I think if you're a smart fighter going into a game plan against him, it seems very likely that approaching a clinch style up against the fence, make him grind, make this kid really, really work for any type of positions where, by the looks of it, standing up, being at a little bit of distance and be able to land some combos is what he's trying to do.
For sure it is. It seems that way for sure. Now let's move on. Number 9, we've got Shamil Gam Zatov. I butchered that one. There's a few more on the list that I don't know if I want to say at all, but this guy is a prospect of all prospects. He could have easily been higher up on the rankings as well. We've got some guys. Typically, our the past few months, our prospects have not been of the heavier weight classes, and you'll see a few of them in this month's Prospect Watch. Just tell our viewers a little bit about Shamil.
Well, I think overall, even before getting into him more specifically, it's kind of cool how we just have this array of female fighters, and then also heavyweights, a couple middleweights coming in here. So it's just a really good group of prospects, and I think you said it really best at the beginning. it's just such a good crop, like in terms of skill from top to bottom, a lot of potential, a lot of excitement, expectation, that kind of thing. But, when we talk about Shamil, he's got a pretty, big fight coming up. I think that's going to be one where, when we looked at his record, we thought that he was going to be kind of our number one, right?
Yeah. We definitely did. Go on there, man. Go on.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I was just going to touch on, the reason why we kind of put him in the list and didn't take him out like we did with Nate Maness. It was, visa issues. He's kind of one of those fighters that's really, been trying his best to get over here. He's not pulling out of fights for any reason or any injuries. Not that that's a bad thing, but unfortunately for him, the only reason he couldn't get into this fight was the simple fact that he couldn't get the paperwork out of Russia.
And that's the thing is he's still on our list, and he doesn't even actually have the fight lined up. He was expected to fight. He had a few cancellations, and as you said, visa issues were the case, which is wild to even see that someone is on our list that doesn't have a fight.
Mm-hmm. And you had to kind of gauge that as us kind of unanimously putting him at number one, and then being, pretty understanding with the fact that it's kind of crazy to think, even if the guy doesn't fight, the fact that he's the number one fighter, let's put him up somewhere, but also kind of give a reason as to why he's on the rankings. But even more so, like when his fight does come around, I mean, a little bit of preamble that we've already given should shed some light on what we expect from him.
Exactly. Number 8, here we got Johnny Munoz Jr. This guy could have been higher up on the ladder as well.
Yes.
Arguably, every single one of these fighters could be higher or lower, depending on where we place them and their matchups, of course. Johnny Munoz Jr., he's 10-1. His lone loss comes to a guy, I believe, that just about made the list. Mm-hmm. So just go over Johnny for us and let the fans know what they can expect out of this guy, because he's a beast.
Yeah, so the cool thing about him that you saw a smile on my face when he kind of came up on the list. It's not the cute picture that I threw up on the graphic, but it has everything to do with just he's a gamer, right? Like what we saw in that Maness fight was everything we want to see from a kid who just wants it, hungry. I mean, that was a short notice fight. We touched on how if it wasn't for some of the point deductions, I mean, that fight was hella competitive. He looked really, really good in some of those places, like up against the fence. He wasn't, being complacent and just staying there and taking too many shots. He was able to reverse the positions. It was actually really cool to see someone who was, so highly touted prior to that Luke Sanders fight kind of, see some hot soup with, Johnny Munoz Jr. coming out of here on short notice, because if you look at Maness's reaction when he wins the fight, I kind of brought this up in the long form video,
yes.
But he kind of reacts very much like, oh shit, yes, I did it, And so I think that in itself was, even with the point deduction, I gotta say that loss kind of sheds more light on Johnny than it does on Nate.
100% it does for sure. Now, number 7, I mean, we could always just move on, but let's get into it. Number 7, we've got
it's
Alishkab Kezrov, yes, and 13-0.
Yeah, so the cool thing about Kezrov that we just want to quickly jump into is he falls into one of the guys that is fighting the person who's also on this ranking. So
yes.
Kind of talking about us being in hot soup, I mean, there's 2 fights directly correlated to this ranking where some of the higher guys are fighting some of the lower ranked guys. And to be quite honest, we would have had another one in Nate Maness who had already fought someone on this ranking as well. So little cool things like that, I think, play a little bit more on us. But, going into a fight against Kyle Dawkins, right? Like we talked about how, the striking's there, the wrestling's there. He's 13-0, right? We know what he's bringing to the table from his background. We want to see some of that improved striking. I think the one thing that he has to be kind of fearful in this fight. We're going to get into Kyle a little bit later, but man, Kyle's a gamer. We just talked about a guy like Johnny Munoz who put up such a great fight in his debut. I mean, Kyle Dawkins did the exact same thing, and we're going to get into more detail there, but it's just it's a tough fight. I think that in a few years, like these are the 2 guys we could be talking about on main cards, depending how the rest of their UFC cards go, or UFC careers go.
For sure. Number 6, we've got No1 Espino, and as we said, we got 2 guys fighting each other. This guy's got a lot of hype behind him. He's 10-1, and again, we've got some guys that have some big records, but this guy has a lot of heat behind him. Go over this guy and tell everyone why he's ranked at number 6.
Yeah, so the big thing for him, it's like if you're 40 years old and you want a guy to kind of just inspire you to do something with your life, like this is the guy you want to follow because it's kind of incredible to see what's happened. You know, I don't want to get too much into it. Check out the full video if you'd like, but basically early in his career, he actually got knocked out by one of the bigger fighters that's graced Bellator, and so at the end of the day, he just took 6 years off. And he took 6 years off, got better, went on a nice little run, ends up on Tough, wins the Ultimate Fighter, and now, is an undefeated UFC fighter. Now, coming out of American Top Team, grappling looks great. I think the one thing he's going to have to really be kind of fearful of is the movement and speed and striking of our number one ranked prospect, Alexander Romanov.
Exactly.
I think that's a really good athlete,
5, moving into the ladies on the card. I think we have back-to-back-to-back ladies at 5, 4, 3.
Yes, we do.
Lupita Godinez, Lupi, local Canadian, up here in BC, one of my girls, yeah, exactly, fighting out of Titan Training Center in Coquitlam. She is an absolute beast. She won the LFA championship in Fight of the Year for that promotion. Absolute war that she could have gotten finished at any point in the fight, but Vanessa Demopolis is as game as they come. I think she's got big things coming for her inside the UFC octagon. 5-0. She could have been placed higher or lower on this list as well, but she's just a beast, man.
It's kind of crazy how MMA kind of has like similar things when it comes to like film and Hollywood. Like you kind of pick up on stars that people want to kind of promote a bit, and I felt like Vanessa Demopolis fell under that a little bit,
She did.
From the LFA career to get right into that Dana White Contender Series fight. And when you think about it, in her most important fights in her career, she kind of fell to two great strikers. I think in the McKenna case, we knew she was going to be a good striker. But in this case, Lupita, I think, surprised a whole bunch of people with how good that striking was. We talked about the jab, and just it was so perfect, landing at will, and not even just, throwing just a jab and kind of waiting it out to set up. She was throwing. Like, she was landing jabs and then following up with kicks and punches.
Exactly.
And I think you just touched on it very well and said that, Vanessa, what a gamer, right? In both fights, we've seen her actually get completely dropped. Rocked may not even be the word, right? Because it looks like she's able to kind of get her wits back pretty quickly and stay in the fight. And the one thing you have to give her credit for is, the heart's there, the cardio's there. It's just she does have to put things together. And I mentioned it on the video. She just got her, most recent LFA win to kind of get things back on track for herself. So we're just seeing a huge crop of female talent kind of make their way over, in 2020 now, heading into 2021. And I think my favorite part about it is it's just not a quantity thing. It's a quality thing too.
And quality comes into number 4, Erin Blanchfield. Her and Lupita got signed on the exact same day. This girl is touted as one of the biggest prospects to come into the organization. Controversial loss to our number 3 ranked fighter. I know you felt maybe it depended on the grappling exchanges. I see a lot of people on Twitter and stuff saying they believe Erin Blanchfield won that fight. She comes in at number 4. She's a beast. Again, another prospect to keep an eye on that could do very, very big things in the UFC octagon.
Yeah, so we kind of had a really great discussion about how we wanted to look at the last 4 fighters, right? I even talked about how Tracy Cortez and the way she fights and the way I like things. I think she's, pound for pound, arguably, could have been in the top 2 in this list. And the why I believe this is I kind of talked about it there, but I would love to kind of have that live chat with you as well. But when you watch the fight, I mean, Erin Blanchfield does a phenomenal job of being an MMA fighter in that fight. I mean, the first round, in my opinion, especially being a guy who's just loved grappling, it's been the reason transitioning from boxing into MMA and loving it so much. It comes with that factor, and I think she's so godly at it for her age. But at the same time, let's take a look at the type of MMA we're watching these days, the days of your, Travis Lutter type of fights, and those things seem to be very, very of the past. And I'm not just talking from a fighter perspective or a Dana White perspective, but judging. I mean, you have to kind of watch that. The last 2 rounds of that fight, especially in the third, I just think Tracy Cortez does a phenomenal job of looking like the more active, the better positioned, the fighter that's landing more. Her movement's great. I think that she works with good wrestlers at Fight Ready. I think that when you watch how she just moves in and out, side to side, she really is just trying to land as much as possible and then get right back out. And when you look at the way the UFC works right now with guys like Wonderboy and all these things, like, whether it's going to get you a finish or not, it's not only the smartest, but it's also, highest potential for maybe a fight bonus of some kind. And it looks to be one of the better styles to incorporate when your wrestling is so good, but use it defensively to just kind of keep the fight where you want it to be.
For sure. As I said, battery is dying. We're running low here. So you spoke about Tracy Cortez there. As you said, she could be higher on the list, lower on the, bumped up to 4, back and forth with Blanchfield. We are even argued, chat about the fact that she could have been number 1 or number 2. But we spoke about her. We know how good she is. We're going to move to number 2. We've got Kyle Dawkins. This guy is something else.
Yeah, like the things that I want to. So we can quickly say like Aaron Blanchfield Cortez, like UFC dream. Let's hope that rematch gets to happen for everybody involved. But yeah, let's get right into Kyle Dawkins quickly. That Brendan Allen fight, I dived really deep into it. I don't need to dive into it again. The thing I love about Kyle Dawkins is the fighters that he's fighting at a 10-1, started his UFC career at a 9-0 record. It's very legit. Like, we're talking ranked style opponents from the get-go. You know, even at that 1-1 record, it's kind of great for him to get that Dustin Stolfus win out of the way. But, combined opponent record, I talked about this, it's basically like 43-4, like 44-4, like something absolutely nuts. And it's like, that's the beginning of his UFC career. So if he's able to put it all together that quickly, because we're talking short notice Brendan Allen, and then, kind of a tune-up fight against Dustin Stolfus because of size, reach, everything, he was just better. And then now we're talking about, borderline main event fight here, like we just said when we touched on Fizz already. It's pretty bomb what we're going to see from these two guys. And
number 1, as I said, we don't usually get the bigger guys this high up in our rankings, but Alexander Romanov, this guy, 13-0, known as King Kong for good reasons. He's finished every single one of his fights. The guy is an animal, as the name says, King Kong. This guy, man, oh man, if he doesn't get the victory and seal our number 1 as Prospect Watch, like, throw our Prospect Watches out the window, man.
Well, let's not go that far, because if we didn't have Juan Espino on the list at 40 years old, then that'd be a different story.
True.
So the way we break this down is, I think athletically speaking and just MMA-wise, Romanov just has such an edge here, right? Like, he's going to be able to deal with the grappling, his ability to read when to use the footwork, the striking, the ground and pound, and push guys into the fence. I think if the fight goes into those areas, Espino's going to have an advantage in some ways when it comes to grappling, but Romanov's a bear. Like, he overpowers you, and he's able to kind of pick where he wants the fight to be. And I think athletically, you're going to see a slight difference, but that's where Espino, between lucky punches and utilizing the grappling in close quarters, that's where we're going to see this fight have the most fun.
That's our top 10 prospect watch. Let's quickly jump into the 2 fight cards this weekend, and I just want to get your opinion on your favorite fight of the night. That's all we'll do, and then we'll wrap things up here. So we got Bellator 256, obviously. Bader versus Machida 2 is the main event. Light heavyweight Grand Prix quarterfinal matchup to move on to the semifinals. It's a fun fight for both these guys. Both veterans in their careers, both guys that have been through the ringer. It's not my favorite fight on the card. Technical difficulties. Anyways, let's just wrap this bad boy up. Suraj, thank you so much for joining me today, man. As we said, Bellator goes down on Friday night. Saturday night, we have UFC Marvin Vettori against Kevin Holland. Last-minute replacement matchup for that one. Suraj, let people know where they can find you, man, and where they can check out your stuff, because your YouTube page is killing it.
Thanks, man. I mean, big things first. I mean, I just want to give a quick shout-out. The Arnold Allen fight on that UFC card this week, and I think is the one that we need to talk about. We touched on Jeremy Kennedy on the Bellator card. Obviously, old school fans are going to love the Machida Bader matchup, but like quickly, just Arnold Allen is putting up some very real numbers in that division, and I think that getting that spot as a co-main against a guy like Siddiq Youssef at 145, I mean, I think we're talking about 2 of the much highly touted prospects that we can't really talk about on our list. I mean, that fight's going to be massive. For sure it is. For sure. Couldn't agree more. Anything else? Yeah, as I said, just let people know where they can find you, my friend. Definitely. We're at the Kaizen MMA. We're going to be rebranding to the Suki MMA real soon. So check us out. Kaizen MMA on YouTube, Kaizen MMA on Instagram, and my personal Suki Scoop on Instagram as well. Suki Scoop. That does it, man. MMASucka Live, Episode 9. A few technical difficulties there to end the show, but we beat it.
3% battery left. You can find us.
You're never going to hear somebody say this, but watch out for Mackenzie Dern striking in that fight. I think that time with pro boxing is going to be something special to watch.
You heard it here. Check us out, MMASucka.com, on Twitter at MMASucka, on Instagram at MMA_Sucka. You can follow myself on Twitter at JeremyBrand604 and on Instagram at Jeremy_604. We're out.